I want to welcome our guest, Gary Catona, who's going to be talking about voice building. He's been the voice builder to the stars in the past, and we're going to talk about voice building to the world, but all the different ramifications for what that may mean to anybody. You don't have to be a singer necessarily to appreciate building your voice and what it can do for you. Now, Gary's thinking about doing this on a global scale, which at Google is pretty interesting. That's thinking really big. That's a 10x thinking, and something that we can truly relate to and appreciate. Gary has worked with some of the greatest singers and entertainers of our time. Really amazing if you've had a chance to look through the full list. And we're going to chat about some of them today, his experiences with them, what he's learned over the past 2 decades, and some of the techniques. Gary has a master in philosophy from Penn State University, and this directly impacted how he goes about his tradecraft and how he approaches the problem. So we're going to discuss how philosophy comes into voice building. So from Whitney Houston to Andrea Bocelli to Tony Bennett to Steven Tyler to even Muhammad Ali. This is just a partial list. The list goes on and on and on. So without further ado, I want to introduce Gary, and Gary's going to give us a little bit more about his background and show you a short introductory video. So thank you, Gary.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to be here and to be around so many eager minds who are always willing and able and interested in exploring new ideas. You know, my story has been an interesting one. I began with a simple passion to become a singer when I was growing up in Philadelphia. Italian-American family with Frank Sinatra, the Beatles playing both at the same house. And I just developed this passion to become a singer, and it started me on the quest to discover what a beautiful voice is. And during that process, it was a very bumpy road because I had to unlearn much what I was taught by my teachers. And in the final analysis, I ended up putting together a process that I call voice building that I've been using now for the past 20 years or so, that has made a major impact on how people deal with their voices. And my goal at this point is to take my process and to create as many beautiful voices as possible all over the world. So how many people here are singers? And how many have studied voice? And how many people here use their voices in their profession? Everybody, right? Are you aware of the major impact that the quality of your voice has on your work? You know, we know that we have a tremendous response to the sound of a person's voice. Not just what you're saying, but the actual quality of your voice can sometimes make a difference between success and failure. This is part of the message that I want to pass on, that I have been passing on for some time.
And sort of, what is your vision for your work?
You know, the more that I teach, the more I realize how important the voice is. You think about it, we all speak, we all love music, we all love singers, yet it's the one field where we don't think enough about. We think about our how, you know, working out and the proper nutrition and so on, but very few of us really think very much about our voice. And think about how crucial your voices are. I mean, look what we're doing right now. We're talking, communicating, and your voice is interesting. The voice is almost a mystical aspect of who we are. Think about it for a second. In the actual quality of your voice, you live. Your identity, your personality, your emotions, your moods, your feelings, all within sound waves. Now, how is that possible? How could mere sound waves capture the essence of who you are? So whenever you're speaking, you're literally transmitting who you are in your voice. So it stands to reason that you should try to have the best voice you can possibly have to express who you are, whether it's in a personal relationship or in your profession.
Yeah, and obviously to Googlers elaborating on voice, that could be a unique way of doing things in the future to create better user experiences. And so we need to think deeply about voice and all its technical implications as well.
And I want to show you a quick little video that we put together that kind of gives you a summation of my career.
If I should stay, I would only be in your way, so I'll go.
I understand you met Whitney Houston back in 2004 after being introduced by Stevie Wonder and began working with her. What kind of a shape was her voice in back then?
When I went to see her in Atlanta, her voice was in a horrible condition. I mean, her speaking voice and her singing voice were both hoarse. She had about one audible tone in her lower register. I was horrified. Because, I had this image of her being a young, beautiful lady with this incredible voice. And here she is sitting in front of me with no voice whatsoever. I got her voice back probably 75% by the time she did her record.
Actually, Gary's system is the only system that I really tried before. Most of the time, I wasn't interested in trying any of the other systems. And I did only 2 weeks, two to 2.5 weeks of this voice building. I mean, that was almost like a miracle because I would always give out, and I did more singing on that tour than I'd ever done before.
I think I owe the range that I have in my voice now and the fact that I can sing for long periods of time with strength and no laryngitis to Gary. It's been remarkable for me.
I noticed that my voice was getting louder. I could project louder, and that I was able to go deeper in tone than I used to be able to, and higher. So it affected my highs, my mids, and my lows.
You always have a lot of stuff to do in the morning?
Not too much.
Tell me, you're an actor, Muhammad Ali. Are you really an actor?
Yes, I've been acting. I've deceived the world. I actually made the people think that I couldn't talk.
Hello, this is Mike Wilmington. I'm talking into a tape recorder on Wednesday, September 17th or thereabouts. My voice sounds this way because of a condition which has been prescribed by several doctors as spastic dysphonia.
This is Mike Wilmington. I've had my voice back now for about 2 years, thanks to Gary Catona and his voice building techniques.
When cancer struck Odd Couple star Jack Klugman, doctors were forced to remove one of his vocal cords. He lost his voice and nearly lost his career. Well, now we have the man who helped the star get his voice back in our Entertainment Tonight cover story.
I think I hear a sound.
It's a matter of taking these muscles that are by nature very tough and applying exercise that make them overwork. And the result is very dramatic, it's very fast.
It was like finding gold. To me, I love it, and I'm able to work. Look at that, I have the power, I can express emotion. It's all because of him.
Other students have ranged from Liza Minnelli and the lead singer of Limp Bizkit to Tony Bennett and operatic tenor Andrea Bocelli.
To have somebody like that put his voice in your hands and say, make it better was quite a delight for me.
Catona has also worked with Lisa Marie Presley and Grammy-winning singer Seal.
Welcome to Talk of Asia. I'm Lorraine Hahn. Joining me, international superstar Liza Minnelli and her voice coach, Gary Catona.
Because I would have said if I was sitting here alone, there's a man called Gary Catona who I trust with my life, I'm chasing him. I follow.
Not romantically, I presume.
No.
And I want her to chase me, so I came here. I knew that's how it would happen.
No, I knew Gary had to be here working, and I have to take my lessons because I just had an operation on my throat, and I couldn't speak at all, let alone sing. And I knew the only person that could make me sing the way I wanted to, with God's gift, which is brand new vocal cords, would be Gary Catona. That I could get, I'll show you on the bottom. That's the bottom, so I'd be going, I'm just a girl again. Now, do something. Help me. I'm just a girl who can't say no, It's all there. Fascinating. I love talking about what works. Because it's great to talk about what if and what could be, but damn, when you find something that works.
And so, joining us now is voice builder Gary Catona.
The first point I want to make is think of the voice in terms of being a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do with muscles?
You train it like an athlete.
That's right. So my concept is you use your voice in an exercise routine that stresses out the vocal muscles. As an example, if I do this.
Well, that's quite impressive, Gary.
You see that, the variety of people that I work with, not just for singers, but people who have vocal problems, even medical conditions.
Now, your approach to it, coming with a philosophy degree and having been a singer yourself, you took a fundamentally different approach than many folks in your field did. So you might be seen somewhat as a disruptor.
That's right.
So how did the quote current community in vocal building and vocal analysis, were they receptive to your work at first, or did it take a while to basically win people over? How did you go about that?
It's like whenever you introduce something new that conflicts with the prevailing wisdom, you always get a pushback, and in my case, it was very severe. What I do in terms of my technique is the complete opposite of what everybody else teaches for the most part. For example, when you study voice, you're oftentimes taught to sing from the diaphragm and to relax your throat and to sing in the nasal passages, where for me it's the opposite. You spend all your time in the throat and ignore the diaphragm altogether. And these are the kinds of ideas that antagonize people. And even when I had evidence that what I did worked with, because I had some really, really nice results, even with people with medical conditions, I still was considered a person non grata.
So often when you're this person in any field or industry, someone discovers you or helps with the breakthrough or the aha moment that actually says, I believe in this person and I believe in what they're doing and I've seen fundamental results. Who was the person that, quote, discovered you, if you will?
I had those moments. It's just remarkable to think that within the course of a year and a half, I had 4 people who discovered me, so to speak. Any one of whom would have done it, but I had 4 at once. And probably the most profound one was Shirley MacLaine. She was about to go on tour with Frank Sinatra, and she wasn't the singer, really. And she heard about me through another student. And out of the clear blue sky, I got a phone call one day. I'm living in this 1-bedroom apartment in Hollywood with hardly making any income whatsoever, and just wondering what I'm going to do next. Next thing I know, the phone rings. It's Shirley MacLaine. She said to me, "What are you doing in 1 hour?" I said, "Let me see here. I'm free." Because I'll be right over. She drove from Malibu to my place in Hollywood and started giving her a lesson. And within 10 minutes after giving her a lesson, she said, "You're going to go on tour with me." And from her came Tony Bennett, Liza Minnelli, Andy Williams, and then I went on tour with her in Sinatra, and that was a whole nother story altogether.
So at the beginning of the video, we heard a beautiful, familiar voice. What was it like working with Whitney Houston?
Boy, imagine working with one of the greatest voices of all time. And what's interesting psychologically is when you teach somebody that you admired as a fan. Think about that for a minute. Imagine somebody, whether it's in sports or whatever, and before you know it, the person is sitting before you and saying, "Show me how to do this." One of the greatest voices of all time. I mean, she's the embodiment of she has so many vocal virtues, it's hard to limit to discuss them. Besides her beautiful tone, her strong voice, her amazing range, her inherent musicality, it was a wonderful experience, and she responded very, very, very quickly to my vocal exercises.
Now, when great singers like Andrea Bocelli, Tony Bennett, Steven Tyler, one of my all-time favorites, they're putting their trust in you with their voices, their livelihood. That's an immense responsibility. I mean, what's that like? I mean, the burden, there's a certain burden and a certain weight that goes with that.
Well, it's interesting. You have to, for people with those kind of large personalities, your first goal is to convince that person that you know what you're doing, because they're used to telling everybody else what to do. So here you are standing in front of a superstar, and you have to tell that person what to do, and that person has to listen without compromise, because if the person doesn't listen, the results are not there, and then you fail. So one of my first goals is to convince the person what I do is real. And the way I do that, what I do is demonstrate with my own voice, different kind of exercise, and I have a pretty strong voice. And once they heard my voice, then they're more available to being taught. And then, luckily, my results are fast. So when I begin to work with them, they can they heard the results in their voices very quickly. And before you know it, they're devoted students.
Fantastic. Now, working with that diverse group of singers, entertainers, and other notable public figures, what was the common thread, the common denominator, or common note, if you would, that you saw between them? Was there such an element that you could identify?
Yeah, I think the people that are really successful in this field, they have a lot of personality characteristics that are in common. One of which is that they have a determination to be successful, and nothing will stop them, and they have no other choice. When I have a student says to me, you know, if I don't make it as a singer, I'll go to law school. When I hear that, I normally say, please go to law school, because you have to have almost an obsession to be this kind of person. Because think about it, it's a desire to have the whole world look at you and to say, look how wonderful you are, look how great you are. And if you're a real artist, if you have real talent, you have a major impact on the world. That's what being a performer can do and being a singer can do.
Right. Well, I want to transition here to your vision that you mentioned up front, from voice builder to the stars, to the voice builder of the world. So let's talk about reaching beyond singers. You know, you've worked with a wide range of people. One of the things that I was intrigued when I was reading about your bio was that you helped Muhammad Ali and Jack Klugman, who were suffering from vocal disorders. Can you tell us a little bit how you went beyond singing and entertainers and into helping people that may have a medical issue or other injury type issue?
What's interesting is that my initial interest in developing my system was to work with singers, but my first successes were with people with vocal difficulties. And I became very well known throughout the country, in fact the world, by returning people with damaged speaking voices. And Muhammad Ali was one of them. He had Parkinson's syndrome, which causes the voice to slur and the voice to get very, very weak. And by doing the exercise, his voice got stronger. And then you saw Jack Klugman in the video. He had throat cancer. He had his throat radiated, and they took off one vocal cord and replaced it with a prosthetic. So when I got his voice, he had nothing. So for me, I wasn't really sure whether I could help the guy out, to be honest with you. But during the course of a few months, his voice returned, and it worked very, very effectively.
And there was another person you worked with, jazz guitarist Larry Carlton.
Larry Carlton.
Who basically suffered a severe gunshot wound to the throat.
That's correct.
And if I recall, I mean, basically he was left with one functioning vocal cord and the other one was paralyzed. How do you work with somebody like that on an injury that's that in-depth?
It's quite a challenge, because when you sing or speak, you need to close the glottis in the throat. That causes the cords to vibrate, right? Everybody knows that who understands music and singing. What happens if one is paralyzed? How do you have, because when one's paralyzed, that means when the person speaks, rather than doing this, that happens, and all the air escapes. That was my challenge. So my whole process is based upon exercise. Now, how do you exercise the voice with only one cord that's moving? Well, this is how I did it, through experimentation. Here's what I found. I would ask Larry to change pitch, and this was his voice, basically. That was his voice. That's the voice I had to deal with. So here's what I noticed. When I had him change pitch, on certain pitches, the breath would increase in pitch. I'd hear this. That told me that there was some kind of movement in the vocal mechanism that caused the breath pitch to rise. So what I did is I stayed on that pitch, and slowly but surely I heard this. Before I knew it, the voice began coming back, and the whole voice returned. And what happened was, the one functioning vocal fold overcompensated for the one that was paralyzed, and past the midline, it made contact with the one that wasn't moving. So he had the strongest vocal cord in the world.
So that raises an interesting point. Again, this vision of voice builder to the world. Can anyone learn your technique? Can it be somebody that's a public speaker, Toastmasters? Could it be a young child? I mean, is there a certain age that you would or would not teach this particular technique, or is it basically applied to anybody?
Anybody could use this process. I use the analogy of being like a sport, because singing and using your voice is athletic, and it's based upon the use of muscles in the vocal mechanism. So if you have the proper kind of exercises, you can develop your voice. Now everybody, no matter how tone deaf some of you might think you are, all of you have musical ability. You recognize rhythms, and you hear patterns, and you remember music, and you like music. So music is a part of our DNA. So that's how we're hardwired. We love music. The problem is transferring the experience of music to the physical process of singing. And what that requires is the vocal mechanism, which is made of muscles, to correspond to when you're hearing something. So if I hear I have a that means what I'm hearing and what I'm producing are the same note. When you build your voice, what you're doing is you're increasing the ability of the vocal muscles to respond to what you're hearing. So you develop what I call ear-throat coordination. And that's why virtually anybody who undergoes this process could develop a singing voice.
So you say the process, how do you see, beyond the interaction we had just there, but how do you see technology playing an enabling force for you to achieve your vision? I mean, how are you going to reach out to the world and teach the world these type of techniques? How do you see technology playing a part? Technology is crucial. For example, in my case, I have a voice building app that people use. It's called Voice Builder, that actually builds people's voices. I mean, it's not as good as being in front of a live teacher, but it works very, very well. And with the wonder of the internet, I teach through Skype sometimes, for example. And technology itself, I mean, we're going to start a voice building academy, which will be a one-on-one interactive school where we're teaching a number of maybe 100 people at once to undergo the voice building process. Yeah. So technology is crucial in realizing what I see my vision to be. And this can be a mobile application. People can do it wherever they're at, whatever platform they may be on in the future. Yes. And I know, you used Hangouts with my son, and it was great to see that interaction technology to bring together you in a remote place, teaching my son voice building exercises, and the clarity for which you can hear his pitch in voice was extraordinary. So for that, I worked with his son who has a vocal difficulty, and over the course of just a few minutes, his voice began returning, and had a very strong response to it. You couldn't see us, but off the camera, he didn't see us. There was tears in his parents' eyes. That's the first time we've heard his voice come out like that. Being that you approached it from a different angle, you wrote a book called Revolution in Singing. What is that book all about when you say revolution? What do you mean by that? Well, what I did was the book was about the history of singing in general, where it originated, some salient singers throughout history that have made a profound impact, like Caruso and Frank Sinatra and Paul McCartney and all these various singers that made such an impact on our culture. But also, I go through the principles of great singing. I talk about how I developed my process, and I try to overcome. There are a number of misconceptions about the voice that are preventing many singers that are naturally talented from becoming great. There are people in this room that would have great voices if you underwent this process, if you were to let go the old concepts. For example, if you're told that you're stuck with the voice you're born with, you're told this, and it's not true. Because the voice is composed of muscles, you literally can build your voice. And the voice that you speak with is not your natural voice. It's the voice that has evolved over time, based upon your childhood experiences and your psychological characteristics and whether or not you're a singer. So the voice that you have is an adapted sound, which means you could take that sound and build it with the proper exercises. Now, when you went in the study field, you actually went back to a historical perspective, if I recall, and actually looked at one of the greatest opera singers of all time, sort of as a mentor, and looking at some of the techniques that he did at the turn of the century. Can you elaborate, one, who he was, and two, what you learned from looking at that historical perspective? The greatest opera singer probably of all time was this gentleman named Enrico Caruso, who was an Italian tenor who died in 1921. He wrote a book called The Art of Singing. In it, he talked about using his throat muscles to create sounds and the singing from the back of the throat. Now, most of you don't really understand what that might mean, but if you study voice today, you're told to sing out of your throat and to sing into your nasal cap, which is called the mask. What they teach today is the opposite of what Caruso teaches, which is the greatest voice of all time. So how did that ever happen? So that was a light for me when I read I just said, this is what Caruso says. We have to take him seriously. When he says sing from the back of the throat, how can you sing from the back of the throat and sing from the front in the mask? How do you do that at the same time? It's not physically possible. Somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong. Caruso was right. So you've often talked about that he was right, but there's a field of isokinetics. Can you tell the audience what that's all about and how you think it directly applies to your philosophy and approach to voice building?
When I went through the process of developing my voice building system, I discovered a kind of exercise program that's called isokinetics. And what I discovered is a way of applying that form of exercise to the vocal muscles. And I could tell you what it is very quickly. It means taking muscles through motion while keeping the movement constant, while keeping the pressure maximized at the same time. That concept builds muscles. So I discovered a way of applying that through vocal exercises that results in very strong, very rapid vocal growth.
So we'd like to take a moment to open it up to the audience for questions. Please, before you ask a question, make sure you have the mic in hand and that's turned on, so that way everybody can hear your question, and also for later playback. So if we can have a volunteer.
My uncle has spasmodic dysphonia, and I was wondering, I guess he could fly out and book a session with you, but does your app help with that, or is there some sort of like a hangout session you can do or something like that where you can work with him?
One of the guy with the vocal condition on the video had spasmodic dysphonia. Yes, the app will help the person, without a doubt.
And you're also available for like hangout kind of bookings or things like that?
Well, probably. Just go to my website, which is GaryCatona.com, and all my information is on there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could bring a whole new meeting to a help out, a voice building help out.
I'm actually a voiceover artist, and I'm actually on my way to a recording just after this, so I'm hoping I can come away with something of value. As vocal actors, taking and doing things like ebooks and long-term reading, a couple of hours at a stint, I find that very difficult, and I find that my pitch changes as I go through the recording, so that by the time I'm at the end of the recording, you can actually go back and listen.
That's right.
What are some of the controls and exercises that could be done to stabilize?
The problem is what's happening is your larynx is rising over time, which makes your voice rise. So the way you deal with that is doing certain exercises which drop your larynx, and I'll show you one right now. Put your finger on your Adam's apple. Everybody do it. Everybody go, ooh. Ooh. Where's the Adam's apple go?
Down.
Down. So watch this exercise. See it?
And run through that cycle.
Run through that cycle. Do it like 3 or 4 notes up and back, very, very slowly, full voice, and it'll help you a great deal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For the interesting presentation.
Thank you.
What would you say is the most common mistake people make with their voice? That someone off the street, when they talk to you, you say, you're doing something wrong. What would you say is the most common mistake?
For singers in particular?
For whatever that, yeah.
Well, first of all, having certain misconceptions about the voice. One of which I spoke about. The fact the voice is fragile is a misconception. The voice is very tough. It's able to endure a lot of stress. And if you're a singer, the number one mistake I meet with singers is they sing in the wrong key. People have an obsession with high notes, to the point of causing the larynx to rise. Whenever you cause the larynx to rise unnaturally, over time the voice begins collapsing and develop all these vocal conditions that you probably have heard about. Do you know that the voice matures at the age of 35 to 40, 45? Yet in the world, most people in the rock business, for example, by that time their voices are gone. Well, the very moment when their voices should be the best, they lose it. Because they're screaming out these notes and not preparing themselves like athletes the way that they should. You got it.
So still an opportunity for me to hit the rock tour at my age?
Can you move?
Hi, Gary.
Hello, love.
So who is the best singer in the Beatles? Who's your favorite singer in the Beatles? Is it really Ringo?
Well, let me explain. Singer is an interesting thing. There are three aspects of singing: the voice, the vocalist, and the singer. When anybody do you want to consider as a singer, think about the 3 components. The vocalist is being able to sing on pitch, having the right technique, and so on. The voice is what's distinctive about your voice. As soon as you hear that voice, you know it. Frank Sinatra, Barbra Streisand, Stevie Wonder. There are people that are great vocalists, but they don't have good voices because you don't recognize who they are, right? They make great background singers or jingle singers, but because they lack the voice, They have a problem making it as an individual artist. And then there's the singer. The singer is being able to make people feel what you're singing about. Somebody could have a bad voice, not being a very good vocalist, but they're very good singers. Did I mention Bob Dylan? But you see what I'm trying to say? So whenever you evaluate a singer, think about those three questions. How's the person as a vocalist, as a singer, and as a voice? So to answer your question, what do you think the best singer is?
I always liked Paul.
You think Paul's the best singer? Now think of what I just said. Is he the one? Does he make you feel the most, or does he, or not?
Yeah,
I would have to.
I'd choose Paul, but
I'd have to go. I'd have to go with Lennon personally.
Okay.
So I've taken some voice classes too, and one of the things that was really fascinating is if you take like guitar lessons, you know, if you screw something up, people can see it, right? You know, they say, okay, change your position, do this, do this. It's like much easier way of teaching because you see what's wrong. But with voice, you really don't see a lot of what's happening in the throat, so you have to listen and you have to kind of interpret like what probably this guy is doing wrong and how to. Like my vocal teacher used to say, okay, imagine there's like a ping pong ball in the back of your throat, whatever.
So horrible.
Right? So then what makes you, clearly you're more successful than a lot of other coaches, so what makes you special in that way? Because that seems like, there's a art to it in a sense, you kind of have to feel it because you don't see it.
Well, it is the whole problem with the field of teaching is based upon the fundamental effect of human nature is that the voice is invisible. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can barely feel it, so it happens on the inside. So there's almost like a magical component to it. Here, a person stands there and opens up his voice, and all of a sudden this amazing voice comes out. Where's it coming from? Right? So it stands to reason that people that are great singers by nature don't really know how they do what they do. It's one of the downsides of being gifted at anything. If you're a gifted runner or a gifted tennis player, you don't know why you're gifted. You just have it. And yet those are the very people that end up teaching. Think about that for a second. That answers a lot of questions. How could it be that the field of singing is in such disarray? Because the people that have the responsibility of passing on the art form have no idea what they're talking about. They just do it by nature and have to make a living, so why not teach? So you have to base upon this vocal study on science. And in my case, it's the science of how the vocal muscles work. And, what I've done is I've aligned my exercises specifically with how the vocal mechanism works on a biochemical level, and that's the only way you should teach voice.
Your exercises, do they have in public speaking, in a sense that your range of tonality, is that just a learned habit, or is there really something else to it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
In public speaking,
yes.
I tend to have a noticeable small range of tones. So would your exercises help in that kind of issue, or is it just a learned habit?
You're talking about pitch range?
Yes.
Your pitch, when you change pitch, the vocal cords change length like a string. The higher you go, the longer the cords become. What controls that movement are muscles. So again, it stands to reason that if you exercise those muscles, what happens to that range? It goes up. So the proper exercise will definitely increase and improve your pitch ability.
So it sounds like a common theme is approaching it as a muscle.
Absolutely.
And most people through the years have experienced some form of atrophy in that they haven't exercised that range and become smaller as you get older just because you don't.
Singing is an art form, but the basis of it is science. And there are two different dimensions that people confuse. They try to make the teaching of singing into much of an art form and not enough of a science. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. So if I feel as though the sound's coming from the inside my head, doesn't mean you teach that, because that's physiologically impossible. It means you teach it properly, and then you deal with the artistic dimension in a different way. But most teachers don't understand that distinction. So again, think of it as a sport. When you sing, you're an artist, but as a student, you're a voice builder.
I talk with a very low tone of voice. But I would like to make it higher because I keep getting lower and lower and lower, and I don't really like it.
Well, I like your voice. And I think you should learn to love your voice because you have a very nice voice. And a low female voice is very, very nice. Don't try to monkey with what nature has given you to the extent that you're ruining something that's natural. you have a naturally low voice, I would enjoy it and just I would encourage you to build your voice at this level, and you'll see your range will increase. In terms of raising your speaking voice, I don't recommend that you do that.
But I sing with a very high pitch. I can sing high pitch.
I'd have to hear your singing to make a thorough judgment about that.
I think studies have shown, though, that the deeper your voice, the more authoritative, whether you're in a meeting.
The voice is a highly psychological,
newscast.
Of course,
yeah.
It's a psychological aspect of who we are. It gives us power.
How to project better, make one's voice lower, slower, and cut out ums.
Again, singing, your vocal mechanism is, think of it like a muscle. You have to improve the ability of your vocal muscles to create vowel sounds. If I go, right, you're hearing an E vowel, you're hearing my throat making that sound. You have to learn, you have to develop that capability. Speaking is basically that, it's flexing muscles. So by using the proper voice building exercises, you develop the ability to flex your muscles more efficiently and more effectively, and you produce more voice. So volume in voice is greater pressure below the vocal folds. When you speakers sing, the chords come together, and the breath that normally flies through is stopped to some extent, and that pressure is the source of your voice. The greater the pressure, the more voice you have. So by building the vocal muscles, the vocal cords come together more strongly, which prevents more breath from escaping, which increases the sound of your voice.
Would you be willing to walk us through one of your beginner exercises?
Sure. Here we go. Watch what I do. First, I want everybody to find this part of the voice. Watch. Do this, everybody. Go, oh. The full voice. That's it. Now, notice where that's coming from the back. Now watch how I do this exercise. Notice the larynx is down. If you look inside my mouth, you notice where my tongue is. Watch one more time. Now I want the men to do it first. All the men, do it with me. Ready? Go. Oh. Here we go. Inaugurated into the voice building club. Girls, same thing, only you have to go a little higher up here. Oh. Girls, oh. Here we go. Oh. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Back down. Now what does that do, that exercise? Lowers the larynx, stretches the muscles, and it keeps the voice in the back of the throat where it belongs.
Notice that I just stood up. I naturally do this because I'm writing a novel and I do open mic readings. And I'm told I do a good job at it, and I've been urged to do podcasting, which is a good idea for budding authors. And when I read, I also naturally slip into different character voices. I can't help myself. That's what I naturally do. Except for my superheroine character, I read that in my regular voice. Could you tell me the name of your app, and what do you have any specific advice for people who tend to naturally do different character voices when they read?
The app is called Voice Builder. It's an iPhone, iPad app called Voice Builder. Again, what you're...
Need the Android app.
That's the plan. Again, you're a gymnast. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's what you are. So, if you do the app, you'll find that your characters will be much more believable. Because again, all you're doing is manipulating your vocal muscles in a specific way. And that's what you'll be able to do that with more efficiency by building your voice.
And Gary and I have already discussed making an Android version of this app to reach even more people throughout the world. So he's already working on that.
Yes. Yes.
At the beginning, you described that most people focus on the diaphragm and you focus on the vocal cords. Do you completely de-emphasize the diaphragm, or what's the relationship between those two muscles in your mind?
I will shock you by telling you something. All of you heard this expression, sing from the diaphragm, right? Do you know it's physically impossible to do that? When you sing, when you take a breath, the diaphragm drops and air fills up your lungs. When you breathe out, which is when you sing, the diaphragm is disconnected, completely disengaged. It cannot be used even if you wanted to. So again, one of the confusing concepts in voice is this concept of singing from the diaphragm. Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging conventional wisdom.
So, there's so many myths that populate the field of voices. It's shocking.
So I'm not a singer, but I used to be a wind musician, and I can also talk fairly loud. And I've noticed over the years, like, it seems like there's definitely a different range of volume that people either have or can develop. And then I've always kind of felt like people talk about the difference between being loud and being able to project. But I've never known if there was anything really there to that, except I've noticed it in people. And I was wondering if you could say something about that, either from the science about it or what you think about that.
There's certain frequencies that travel better than other frequencies. For example, in an orchestra, the piccolo really travels, right? You have to tell the piccolo player to hold back, so he doesn't overtake, and it's a thin sound, but the frequency carries. In singing, you have certain kind of frequencies. There's a frequency called the singer's format, for example. It's a part of the voice that if I go he, hear that buzz sound in the voice? That's part of the singer's format, which penetrates. You can have a sound that's big, but doesn't have the singer's format, which doesn't carry as much as a voice that's smaller, but with that frequency. So it's the frequency we're talking about. And
I guess I wonder about that a little bit because, like I said, when I was a wind musician, and I could play a note on something, but I know like a pro, like I was a saxophone player, so I could play something, and Stan Getz was able to be like 10 times louder than I was.
He found the frequency to travel. Okay. That was part of his skill. You know what I'm talking about? That's what he did. He's able to find those frequencies that seared through everything else.
I sort of have two questions. One was a follow-on to what you just said about not singing from the diaphragm. Yet, there has to be pressurization because clearly the difference between a quiet voice and a loud voice has to do with the pressure behind the column of air. So how do you describe that if not singing from the diaphragm?
Okay. First of all, you sing from the throat because that's where the vocal cords are. That's the first point. The cords are not located in your stomach. They're located in your throat. Secondly, breath is crucial to singing. But what controls the breath are the vocal cords, not the other way around. When you speak, the vocal folds close and the breath is blocked. And the way the vocal cords behave determines how the breath is maneuvered. We have it in reverse, mistakenly. We have the breath controlling the vocal cords, which doesn't work that way. And I noticed this when I began teaching people with vocal problems. Many of them would have no breath. They'd speak and off the breath would leave. And you say, well, the problem with the person is a breathing problem. By strengthening the vocal folds, all of a sudden, not only does the breath come back, but the voice comes back. So by making the vocal cords stronger and more coordinated, it literally causes the voice to be produced in a more efficient way. So the emphasis is on the throat. That controls the breath, not the other way around.
And the other thing is, you were talking earlier about vocal strain, and I was wondering if you could talk at all about the transitions of chest voice and head voice.
Yeah, one of the important concepts in singing is moving from one register to the next. And it's been the bone of contention for a long, long time. And there are various exercises that purport to be able to show this transition. For example, if I go, that transition into that part of the voice. How do you get there? You get there by using certain vowel sounds that guide you into making those kind of transitions. See what I'm saying? So it's knowing how to create the vowel sounds in the throat that will guide you into other registers.
Well, thank you, everybody in the audience. I did want to ask one final question, and that is, there was an article in Time magazine that singing actually changes the brain. And so I want you to tell us a little bit more about that, but I want to know if the converse is true, and that is, does having someone sing off key changes the listener's brain?
It changes this listener's brain, I'll tell you that right now. Of course. I mean, first of all, there are certain theories about why do we sing, and some people argue that it has an evolutionary purpose. For example, when you sing, what happens? You're together with other people, you're communing with other people, and you're sharing an intimate part of who you are. At the same time, you're retaining your individuality. Think about that one. That's why the vision of making the whole world sing is such a beautiful idea, because it does two things at once. It brings people together, but allows for individuality at the same time. So, they know also that singing causes certain hormones to be released into the brain, and it may have an evolutionary experience, but what I can tell you is that it's a beautiful experience.
Fantastic. So I want to thank Gary. I encourage everyone to check out his voice building app, also his book, Revolution in Singing. Personally, I want to thank you and what you've done for my son. It's just amazing to hear more about the subject and to dispel preconceived notions and debunk myths that have perpetuated through time about singing in the voice. So we greatly appreciate that. Greatly appreciate everybody in the audience, our tech support, and on behalf of the Google Talk series, thank you very much for coming over today.
Thank you, everybody.